Welcome to the Bothell City Council regular meeting of July 25th, 2017. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All council members are here except Council Member Spivey, who's absent and excused, and Council Member Sandberg, who will be here shortly, but she's also absent and excused. Meeting agenda approval. Is there any changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none. How about the projected agenda? Councilmember Freed.
Great. Appreciate the time. I'd like to see that the council could have an opportunity to speak about heroin injection sites in the city of Bothell. King County Council just passed a statement saying that cities should have the right to cite or not cite them within their jurisdictions. I know that Nancy Backus, who is actually on the opioid task force, who's the mayor of Auburn, they just voted recently not to allow them within their community. Bellevue voted not to allow them, and Sammamish has it on their agenda in September. So I'd love to see if the council wants to have that discussion maybe in September.
Anybody have any input on that, or we can just add it to the hopper? Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. Any other projected agenda items? See, Councilmember Sandberg gave me one, but I would do it no service by trying to put words in her mouth, so she'll have to wait till September to place it. Let's see. Review of upcoming public engagement opportunities. There we go. Music in the Park concert series. Fridays, 6:30 p.m., July 7th through August 25th at North Creek Sports Field 3. Linwood Community Band Concert, Saturday, July 29th, starting at 7 p.m. at the park at Bothell Landing Amphitheater. Recess Monkey at Just Kidding Around, Wednesday, August 2nd, 11 a.m. at the park at Bothell Landing Amphitheater. And with that, we have special presentations. So the first is a proclamation by me, so I'll go down to the podium here. Or Steve or Marlene Hofer, is that the correct pronunciation? Exactly right. Yes. Do you want to come up here and we'll do the proclamation real quick? So this is a proclamation of the city of Bothell, and it's for Steve's Café Day. Excuse me. Whereas Steve and Marlene Hofer, yes, opened a restaurant on Bothell's Main Street in August 1997 and named it Steve's Café. And whereas Steve, Marlene, and their staff have served countless customers, treating each as neighbors and friends, and whereas Steve's Café has contributed to the economy and success of Main Street for the past 20 years, and whereas Steve's Café has become part of the fabric of Bothell's downtown core, providing a gathering place for its community members. And whereas the city of Bothell is proud to celebrate Steve's Café on the occasion of its 20th anniversary, and whereas Steve's Café will celebrate their 20th anniversary from August 1 through August 4th, 2017 by rolling back their prices to 1997 prices.
Some of the prices.
Oh, some of the prices. There's a slight caveat there. Now, therefore, I, Andrew Raham, the mayor of the city of Bothell, do hereby proclaim August 1st, 2017 as Steve's Café Day in the city of Bothell, and I encourage all city residents to visit Main Street to wish Steve and Marlene a happy anniversary.
Thank you.
This is for you guys.
Okay, come on, man. Okay.
Yeah,
We'll get over there.
yeah, come up and say something if you'd like.
Say something.
Do you want to say something
I
too?
just want to say to
Steve's Cafe is the best.
I just wanted to say, I want to thank the city council and everybody else. I was so scared in April 1st when you started the construction on Main Street. But the way you have handled it, it has not affected me at all. You guys have worked really great with all of us, and I really applaud you for everything that you've done, and we haven't missed a beat, so it's very proud. Thank you.
Well, of course, I don't have anything to say, do I? Thanks to Davina, I put the bug in her ear, and she brought all this together. Kathy called us, and we're all here with our support group. They don't want to be called supporters. Support. Oh. You didn't tell me you were going to do that. That is crazy. She is a new customer that we've only had in one other time. May not be allowed again. May not be allowed again. Whoops. Oh, this rolls. Oh, I could go wherever, couldn't I? Anyway, thanks to all of our regular customers and all of our newbie customers that will become regulars. And we've seen people, the lady comes in and she's pregnant and all of a sudden the kid's graduated. And I'm thinking, have you guys ever gone back and figured out what has happened in the last 20 years? A lot. Really a lot. And I thought, holy moly. And then we have all these people that are old now that we're younger.
Thank you, Marlena.
You're welcome, Michael. But anyway, I want to thank the support group, the regulars, the council, and Induta has worked so close with us with the city projects. And I don't, is she here? No. Okay. But anyway.
Her boss is right over there, so.
Where's her boss?
Oh, there's a couple of them over there.
Okay. Anyway, thanks to you guys in Induta. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
So next we have Snohomish County Conservation District, Kate Riley, Community Engagement Program Manager.
Oh, I'm sorry we didn't bring you any leftovers.
That's okay.
Thank you, Council, for having me. My name is Kate Riley. I am a program manager with the Snohomish Conservation District. So we serve the northern half of your community. King Conservation District serves your lower half. We work really closely together. They were here a few years ago talking about their rates and charges. So I think it was 2 years ago that the legislature allowed the most highly populated conservation districts to move to a different structure that they felt was more legally defensible, which is a rates and charges instead of a flat assessment. And they also allowed us to go up to a $10 per parcel rate. So I wanted to talk to you about that and talk to you about some of the things that we're doing here in Bothell. Just going to start my timer here. So you guys probably know about us. We are a state agency whose mandate is to serve voluntarily with private landowners. So like many of our watersheds, yours isn't any different. The majority of landholding is privately held. And so getting those folks making management choices towards the same practices that our cities are doing is really going to help us move the dial for our natural resources. So we've been around for over 75 years. You know, like the restaurant, we've seen generations. Sometimes we've been serving the third generation of some of our ag families here in this county. So we approach things on a very best science basis. We have engineers on staff, scientists. We're really trying to look at innovative solutions for our private property landowners. So, you know, our heritage has really been in agriculture, but as our demographics have changed, we've really moved into habitat restoration, which is an important piece of your work here. Over the life of our assessment, we've planted over 150,000 trees. And then, you know, as we've urbanized, we've really tried to be innovative in our cities. And so we work with HOAs, we, you know, break through with other community groups and just try and serve all type of landowners where they're at. We have a very strong youth education program. We work with Janet Gear, who is such a force here in the city, so we work very closely with her. And we're just mentoring the next generation of our scientists with over 75,000 student contact hours completed since 2010. We are leaders on a regional scale. So we work very closely with King CD and also all 12 of our Puget Sound conservation districts. And so, you know, like Bothell, we have very local needs, but it's just part of a bigger system. And so, you know, some of the costs that are associated with the rates that we receive as private homeowners, those costs are going to Puget Sound Recovery, as well as local solutions for our own communities. Partnerships are such a key for us. We work with over 140 organizations at a local or regional level, and we invest in them. We invest in WSU Extension quite a bit, and just other folks. We want to bring the money back to this community. So we're really, that's why I'm here, is really wanting to hear you as partners where your vision lies in our work. So some of the things that we've done in the past, we've brought quite a few Department of Ecology grants in partnership with you guys. One was the Queensboro Watershed. So this is a picture of some of the erosion that's happening in our backyards. And so our engineer worked to do a feasibility study to look at best sites where low impact development might be the most impactful. So on the left, we're with homeowners, and on the right, we're at Frank Love Elementary School. We also have put in culverts on private property for Tambark Creek. We had some flooding there a couple of years ago. And then looking into the future, we just, hoping with the capital budget negotiations, we ranked for a project in North Creek Park. So that was some of the feedback we got from your public works staff. You know, we really need that streamside landowner resources for our community, helping them to implement practices on their property. So this grant will help us do that even more. So as I mentioned, we have had a flat assessment. It has been $5 per parcel plus 5 cents an acre for our larger parcel folks since 2010. There has not been any rate increase since then. And then what we're proposing to do, as King has done, is go to a rates and charges system, which is, so we had a financial analyst match our services to different land uses. So they said, okay, for an urban parcel, what are the services that that landowner could partake of? And they're direct benefits. So like a person can come to us and apply for cost share, you know, maybe to install a rain garden to help out with some runoff. And then those indirect benefits, like I talked about, that we all share. So education of our children, recovery of Puget Sound, those were indirect costs that may be built into that. So the assessment landed at approximately, it actually was a little bit over $10 for residential parcels. So the residential rate of $10 is what we propose for most of the residents here in Bothell. So that was that. So the financial analyst came a little bit higher than that, but we are only allowed $10 is the maximum rate. So, you know, the rest on the left-hand column, those are by land use type. Really quickly, this is a map of our whole district. some of you may have heard some of the discussions going on at the county. So the green area in the top, the Snohomish Clean Water District, they have since dissolved. So the county is now no longer having that as a separate district. So that district is proposed to be a part of our district now. So they will be assessed under the new rates and charges. And you can see the rest of the assessment area has been the same for 8 years. And we also serve Camano Island. So why are we doing this? So this is an aerial of Bothell. You guys know more than anybody, we have increased pressures on our natural resources. We really need to respond to the thousands of people coming into our communities each month. Urban stormwater, wow, this is a big issue for us and the region. This is the issue that we have partnered with you guys on since the beginning. And I think, these are the type of partnerships that it's going to require to meet the goals that we have so North Creek is a big one. So we have impaired waters in this community that we're all going to have to work together to try and figure out how to raise that water quality. We also would like to have increased investment in our local agricultural sustainability. We have an amazing resource here in Snohomish County, and even historically, definitely going down, and we would like to just see that local food base stay here in our county. And then we will continue to invest in youth education. This is probably our biggest impact. And, these are the people that are going to be on our city councils in another 20 years, and we want them making the right decisions and have the tools to do so. So the benefits of our work and a rate proposal is, we're kind of known as the boots on the ground. That picture is of our colleague Chris. We have a U.S. veteran crew. We partner with the Washington State Veteran Affairs. And so this is just one example of how we partner to get things done. So they're building rain gardens, they're installing trees, they're talking with landowners, and making the world a better place. Another benefit of our revenue is that we use it to directly leverage common objectives. So we've leveraged almost $14 million since 2010, and this is planned to only increase in the future. So another service that we lend to you specifically is customized city programming. And it's been a little bit unique here in Bothell the last, 8 years, is that we've had more of a, I would say, an opportunistic relationship. With many other cities, we have an ILA existing with you, so it allows us to work together. With a lot of other cities, we create a scope of work each year. And it's really to meet those common objectives. And so this is the way that we have chosen to reinvest back into the communities from which we derive a revenue. King Conservation District is a little bit different. So they have a grant program. I know that they have given you grants, I think, for urban forestry and other things. We have chosen to keep our, really invest in our own staff and support you on those goals. So, kind of going back to Public Works' desire to have more streamside landowner engagement and projects on the ground. That would be kind of a common objective that we set per annual year, and we bring money to the table to make that happen. So, yeah, I think I'm very, very interested in continuing to understand the vision for your city and help you reach that. We really strive to be transparent and accountable to not only our partners, but the people that we serve. We just got an Outstanding Stewardship Award from the state auditor, which was, not a fun couple of weeks to go through an audit, but we were glad to know that we're on the right track. And we're constantly looking for feedback. These are some of our board members. We are governed by a board. And we also have a citizen advisory committee. Per legislative district, we have representation from folks. And then we also have special topic-based groups. So we have a teacher group that really lends us guidance on our planning. So in summary, we are a very diverse district. We can help fill a lot of niches. So one of the main niches that we help serve cities is for their stormwater NPDES permit. So there's a lot of little boxes that your staff has to check, like I provided outreach to XYZ, and we're a very cost-effective way to do that. Because again, we can help leverage those dollars to make that happen. We can partner with King CD, so we're working on both sides to really meet the goals that you have for the future. And I left just 2 minutes for any questions that the council may have.
Any questions? Okay, Deputy Mayor?
I just wanted to clarify. So the rate increase would put Snohomish County Conservation District on par with King County?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Freed?
Yep. How do you work with HOAs? Do you have an active outreach to them? Because most communities are built with some type of stormwater facility, and my concern is a lot of them don't maintain that stormwater
Yes.
facility, and they get filled up with silt, and they're supposed to every 25 years or whatever it might be. Do you have an
Yes.
education program? What do you do?
We do. So just to start from the beginning of your question, the approach is we usually have a champion, we call them. So we have an in that believes in us and that can be a representative, because there's nobody better than a neighbor to advocate for us. So we kind of search for those, fingers out in the community. We always ask if folks are part of an association, and we go straight to them. There's a lot of different ways we figured out, because they have committees like everybody else, and covenants and different things. And what I've learned over time is that it's a long-term relationship. It's something that you have to keep following up at. You have to keep bugging them. And as far as your stormwater pond question, yes, that's an extremely pressing issue. And we've dealt with it a couple different ways. We've done classes where we teach folks, hey, these are the things you can't do, and these are the things you need to contract out, and here's a list of contractors, and this is how you need to manage that person. So we do kind of these hands-on classes. We've also maintained ponds through our veteran crew, which again brings down the cost of maintaining those. And then the third issue is, so many of our stormwater systems at this point are undersized. And so our engineer can go in, and for the city of Mill Creek, we've actually redesigned ponds so that they can hold more capacity. It's kind of the cheapest way to go, rather than having to build a whole new pond.
Yeah, well, some of these facilities can cost up to $500,000
Yes.
even for a 30-unit development.
Yeah.
So it's extremely expensive to build these, and yet I'm sure there's thousands of them across Snohomish County. So if you multiply thousands times 500,000, that's a resource that you could never come up with, and the jurisdictions themselves couldn't. And yet to make these things go from useless to useful is probably an HOA's expense of anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000, depending. And so educating HOAs, make sure they're properly set aside funds, and to excavate these out so we can have these facilities operating again, it's such a huge effort.
Yeah.
If you can lead that charge across Snohomish County, I think that would be valuable. Where does the Snohomish Conservation District stand on the Hearst decision that the legislature's working on?
So we were apolitical. It's a very interesting quandary because a lot of our grants, like the one I just talked about in North Creek Park, that's tied up in the capital budget. And so we're all like, what's going to happen with all of our capital funding? Whereas we still, like I said, our heritage is with the agriculture of this state. And so we're always kind of trying to play the white hat with everyone. Yeah.
So no formal position was
No
taken?
formal position.
Okay.
No.
All right. Well, hopefully they'll address it soon.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Councilmember McNeil?
Thank you. You had a map that was showing kind of the boundaries.
Yes, sir.
Can you show that again?
Yeah.
So my question's kind of going to the area, coverage area. And the Snohomish Clean Water District is being included now, correct?
That's right, sir.
So the increase, by adding that additional area, what type of financial increase will there be to the overall budget for including that area?
Yeah, I think it is around $200,000 to $300,000, and that is right now. That's paid for by the county. We have a contract with the county to serve that area. That's where many of our ag lands are coming from. But now they're kind of switching that cost over to our landowners.
Gotcha. So if the overall budget, I think, is 13 million, is that what I think I read?
No, the overall projected budget for the rates and charges, I believe, is 2.5 million.
2.5 million.
We have about, so I might have been a little bit low on my estimate of the Stilly edition. So right now our budget is about $1 million. That would potentially double with our rate increase, plus the addition of the Snohomish Clean Water District parcels.
Okay, and would there be many projects that would be up in that area that would be funding out of that same budget that would above and beyond the 200 that's coming in from that area?
I think the majority of, we have a ton of grant funding up there from a lot of different sources. So I do not think we would be asking, a lot of our urban dollars to be going up there.
Okay.
Is that kind of your
Yeah,
question?
I'm just wanted to just verify that. So that's a fabulous answer. Thank you. And last, I wanted to find out, you mentioned youth programs.
Yeah.
And working with youth in partnership opportunities. Can you explain a little bit how youth programs and other organizations can become partners with you?
Yeah. So we are the provider for the Snohomish County Stormwater Education Program, and they brought in the majority of the cities. And so Bothell came in as a partner to that, Monroe, Mukilteo. So we work in all of the cities with a common curriculum. So we have an educator that goes in mostly 3rd through 5th. And so we teach kind of this consistent curriculum that's in line with the stormwater permit. And the great thing about that is that it's, again, the county pays some and then the city pays some based on the percentage of county versus city kids. And then our niche has really been in taking it a step higher and really addressing project-based learning and STEM in our schools through really innovative stormwater techniques. So our engineer goes into the schools, they get that career connection with him, and he starts designing with them. So he'll take a grade band, all the way through design and building and maintaining of a system on school property.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have questions? I just had a couple quick ones for you.
Yes, sir.
So the increase to $10 a property, a parcel, is that voter approved or is that just, how does that work?
It is approved by county council, and we have submitted it, but we have not been called to testify with them. I think we're thinking late fall.
Okay.
But they may not decide until after the election. So we may not know the decision until the end of the year.
So I know the overall budget's not gigantic, but when you double your charge, so what is it that you guys are going to do in addition to what you're doing now?
I think we're going to go deeper. I think where we really want to, we really want to hone the resources that we've spent 75 years developing. One of the biggest changes in my budget, so I'm in charge of the urban programs, is in landowner cost share. So I have $10,000 right now to spread throughout, the county on the highest priority projects that to help landowners work towards change, because that's really the only thing I have. I have incentives. That's what we are. We're an incentive-based organization. That $10,000 goes like that, and so this change would, I think we budgeted for $80,000. So all of a sudden I have much higher budget to bring in my vet crew to help those streamside landowners, address erosion and water quality concerns here in Bothell.
Okay, so it fills a need basically that you
It
have
fills
that
a
you
need,
haven't been
yeah.
able to fund. Okay. Those are my two questions. You're good? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you
for coming
for
in.
having me.
Appreciate it. Next is the visitor comments. I have no sign-up sheets. Is there anybody that wanted to? Oh, I do have sign-up sheets. Okay. So, hold on a second. I always read the little excerpt here. Each person addressing the council will give his or her name in an audible tone of voice for the record, and unless the council grants further time, shall limit the address to 3 minutes. No person other than the council and the person having the floor will be permitted to enter into any discussion, either directly or through a member of the council without the permission of the mayor. And the first person, or only person, is David Habowitz.
Good evening, Mayor and Deputy Mayor and council members. I'm David Habowitz. Of course, you know me and my background, but for those that are listening who might not, I've been very active in taking my knowledge and expertise in transportation and working on design improvements in our area for things like several intersections and roadways, including the tolls on 405 and some other traffic instances in our area. And I'm here tonight to talk about the wonderful multi-purpose, or the multi-way, right out here on the street, the multi-way boulevard. That's what I'm trying to say. And I wanted to bring up the design issues that are involved in that. I've already emailed you just before the meeting, and I included a link to the article that I wrote up on this, and it's in the blog area of the stop405tolls.org. So it's the first blog article. But if you would take the time to read through that and look at the videos that are there, I think it highlights some of the things that are concerns. And in posting it on Facebook, a lot of people have dialed into that. If you look in the Bothell community group in Facebook, if you're in Facebook, and you can kind of get some of a feeling for what the feedback is that the public has regarding the multi-way boulevard. Just know that there are several design flaws in there that are significant, and the fact that we need a YouTube video to explain how to use it in and of itself says it's too complicated. Most people will never see the YouTube video, or at least not before they have an accident or something like that. And just in real brief, in the 15 or so minutes that I was there observing, I actually nearly got hit just outside at the exit from the ranch restaurant, where people are coming out and turning right, and they came up over the curb because the design is that the curb is so abrupt. I watched somebody try to parallel park on the left side, which is very unnatural. Normally you're doing parallel parking on the right. I don't have one of those cool cars that automatically does it for you, but I would wonder if they actually know how to parallel park to the left side instead of the right. So something to think about. I saw a tandem bike go the wrong way on that roadway, And in particular, they didn't really have a choice because right now they're doing the construction there. But even if they weren't doing the construction there, and again, there's a video clip, I managed to catch that on video, and a distracted driver, and all I can say is this is not the fault of the roadway, but combined with the distracted driver, just watch the last video in that, and it's scary. It's terrifying that that kind of driver exists on our roadways. And when you mix it with what we have with this the multi-way boulevard, we have a big potential problem. So please take a look at that. And for those of you in the community, I would just say, take a look at the video and learn how that roadway works so that we can all be a little safer in it until we can do something to improve it.
Great, thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to provide public comment? Seeing nobody, we'll move into the consent agenda. Nothing's been pulled. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councilmember Agnew to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion on the motion? I just have one quick thing I wanted to say. I'm super excited about the interlocal agreement with Snohomish County for installation of an adaptive traffic signal control system. That'll really improve our traffic downtown on 522, 527, all the way up to Everett. It's just a huge improvement, and it's a long time coming, and I really look forward to it being live. So that's all I had to say. Go ahead, place. Anybody else want to say anything? Nope. Place your vote. Passes unanimously with Councilmember Spivey absent and excused. Next is the public hearing, AB 17 oh wait, did I just skip over? No, right into public hearing. Okay, AB 17-123, ordinance amending development regulations for downtown sub-area, part 2. And so we're not opening a hearing, we're just continuing the public hearing. And we have a staff presentation by Mr. Boyd.
I think you may be, in fact, opening the public hearing. We had a study session on June 27th.
Oh, okay. I'm officially opening the public hearing. There you go.
Thank you. Good evening. So I have a brief presentation. There's not a lot new, some minor tweaks to what was presented at the study session on June 27th, and the staff report did include some responses to comments that were received at the June 27th hearing. So I hope those were clear. I'm not going to get into that in this brief presentation, but can in the Q&A following. So there's really, this was part of a group of miscellaneous downtown code amendments. Council passed a code amendment having to do with building height measurement on June 13th. One private request for a downtown code amendment has been deferred by the applicant, leaving us with 4 issues to deal with tonight. Home occupations and live-work regulations, building orientation, building setbacks and separation, really 2 issues that we've combined it together, and canopies and balconies extending into the public right-of-way. So jumping right into home occupations and live-work uses, the downtown plan currently kind of conflates those 2 terms and kind of uses them interchangeably and not quite accurately. So this is a code amendment to clarify that those regulations and to clearly define a live-work space as a space that can function as a residence or a commercial use, whether retail, office, business, and personal services. And the function of these spaces is they provide some flexibility of use. So as downtown's developing, perhaps there's not as much demand for retail. These can be residences or business personal services. Over time they can convert and go back and forth. In fact, we've already seen that happening with some of the live work spaces in the Six Oaks development. Home occupations, on the other hand, are allowed in all of our residential zones. The downtown plan, I think, inadvertently by conflating them with live work uses, did not allow them in the Sunrise Valley View neighborhood. They had been allowed prior to the downtown plan, and our feeling is that they should be allowed as in any other single-family zone, and in fact, in any residential zone. The idea is that if you want to work from your home, you can do that with certain limitations. So that's what this code amendment deals with, and there seem to be not a lot of questions about this, and support for this at the study session. The issues 2 and 3, building orientation and the setback separation requirements, is something that comes up, has come up as the downtown plan evolves, the downtown revitalization, I should say, evolves. And the initial projects were larger lots, some lots that the city had sold. And as those start getting purchased and committed, we're getting more interest in development of infill lots. And that's raised some questions about the downtown plan, some issues that we felt were worth looking at for some code amendments. So the first one has to do with building orientation. On the picture in the upper left, we've got the code says that all buildings must be oriented to and front on streets. And as we look at some of the larger lots, it does seem reasonable to have some buildings that are set back and back of lot buildings. And in fact, all of these examples here show buildings that are proposed developments or hypothetical developments that have back of lot buildings. And then the setback and separation requirements have come up as we've looked at smaller lots, like the one in the lower right corner, where the setback requirements and building separation requirements make it more difficult to do multiple building developments. And we thought it was worth, it was an obstacle that was worth looking at in terms of a code amendment. So focusing on building orientation first, this is the plan for Lot N, where the old Dawson building was, that has at least 4 buildings that are not directly on the street. But again, it seemed like a reasonable development plan with the public open spaces bisecting the plan and front entrances facing that. So, and in fact, we've, as a code interpretation, we've allowed this kind of thing, but we thought it was worth making this code amendment to make that clear and very transparent to applicants and reviewers alike. Again, this one did seem to have strong support at the study session. Here again, two examples of smaller infill development proposals, each of which proposed putting buildings that were oriented toward the alley, what in Vancouver are called lane houses, as a way of encouraging infill development. These smaller infill lots also demonstrate issues with building setbacks and separations. And we've had developers, architects come to us and ask if we shouldn't just rely on the International Building Code to control that. Well, that would allow buildings as close together as 6 feet apart, basically be a 3-foot setback on each side. We didn't think that was reasonable. It does happen in our detached condominium developments in the city, but in looking at the surrounding neighborhoods, Lower Maywood to the north of downtown has special regulations that allow 5-foot setbacks on each side with no restriction on living space windows, whereas the downtown plan requires 10 feet if you have living space windows. We thought that it was worth looking at an amendment that would allow the 5-foot setbacks on these smaller lots with living space windows, and a condition saying that the windows must be placed so they're not oriented directly at the windows on adjacent developments. Similarly, the building, well, here, still on the setback issue, this rendering of a development, 5-unit development proposal shows that at that 5-foot setback line, there are no windows shown. Entrances are set back from that, and then the upper levels are set back another 5 feet so that they can have the living space windows. So architects and developers have been able to design around that, but it has created some challenges. So the Planning Commission recommendation is to allow 5-foot side setbacks with living space windows on lots of less than 15,000 square feet in downtown transition and downtown neighborhood district with that condition about the window placement. Similarly, the space between buildings is basically has been set up to equal the space that you'd have between adjacent developments with a setback with living space windows. So 2 10-foot setbacks would equal a 20-foot separation between buildings. In the proposal, this hypothetical example on the upper right, trying to do a development that is kind of more in scale with the adjacent older development in adjacent residential zones, and that also provides a maximum number of units with the opportunity for windows on 3 sides. This proposal would squeeze that building separation down to 10, and again have the 5-foot side setbacks with living space windows. Since that wasn't allowed by the code, the code tends to push development into a single building, attached building, that may relate better in form to the buildings in the downtown core, but not so much to the buildings just outside the residential zones, just outside the downtown sub-area. So again, the Planning Commission recommendation was to change the space between buildings requirement on parcels of less than 15,000 square feet in the downtown neighborhood, downtown transition, to 10 feet. And then as we looked at those, we also had gotten some feedback in the SR 522 and general downtown corridor districts that had a 30-foot space between buildings, which was some developers finding problematic, and again, they do allow the 10-foot side setback, so 2 side setbacks would result in the 20-foot separation. So the proposal is to reduce that to 20 feet. The SR 522 corridor also has view corridor, much of it has view corridor requirements that will tend to create larger corridors than the 20 feet. So part of the analysis was looking at the sizes of lots in the downtown sub-area, and as you can see along Lower Maywood, there are a lot of smaller lots. A bigger one is just under the 15,000 limit, but many of them are in the 7,000 to 9,000 size. As you get away from there, in the general downtown corridor, along Beardsley to the northeast, or in the downtown transition district, along West Hill, which tends to have larger lots and doesn't have the reduced setbacks that the Lower Maywood area has, the lot sizes are bigger. So there are a few of the smaller lots that would qualify, but it would mostly apply to these small lots along Lower Maywood. And then in reviewing these requirements for all of the downtown zones, the proposal adds a clarifying note in the downtown core that seemed to imply that you could build to a 0 side setback with windows, but just references building code limits and restrictions. In downtown neighborhood, we are proposing adding a condition, as there is in downtown transition, that 0 setbacks require at least a 10-foot setback from adjacent buildings and an easement. As I said, reducing it to 20 feet in the 522 and GDC districts to match the other districts in those transitional areas. And in the Sunrise Valley View district, changed the 15-foot side yard setback without living space windows to be what was intended. This is a scrivener's error, really, the combined side yard setbacks that we have in most of our single-family zones. Also in downtown neighborhood and downtown transition, the proposal is to allow the 5-foot setback and with living space windows with the condition on the placement of the windows and 10-foot building separation on the lots of less than 15,000. Planning Commission also, and I'll touch on this briefly later, in looking at these also realized that there were some issues with the public open space requirements on these small lots and recommended the council initiate a code amendment on that. So the fourth issue is canopies and balconies. This is an amendment to address the issue that downtown plan allows canopies to extend 6 feet into the public right-of-way. Balconies are limited to 2 feet, and we've had inquiries about allowing second-level balconies to serve dual purpose and extend 6 feet like canopies. At the study session, there were questions about what other jurisdictions do, and there was a specific mention of New Orleans. There are a couple of examples from New Orleans, one with a upper level canopy or balcony that does extend almost the full width of the sidewalk. Granted, we're not proposing to create a French Quarter in Bothell, but this is just shows an example of how that works in that context. Also how balconies that extend shorter and longer distances combined with canopies can make a very interesting street front. A little further research caused us to tweak the proposal a bit. So we're now, the proposal is to allow second level balconies to extend to 6 feet or half the width of the sidewalk, provide the clearance is at least 15 feet above the sidewalk. And that's to match the building code's requirement, which allows projections, but they go up from 8 feet, from a height of 8 feet to 15. So to get to the full 6 feet, you'd need to be at the 15-foot height. And that's close to the height that is required for second floor ceiling space in storefront retail. So this shows what we allow for balconies now and what would be allowed by allowing second floor balconies to extend 6 feet to equal and serve dual purposes as canopies. The proposal was to limit these to a 50-foot length, which is the same as the maximum storefront width in the code. The Planning Commission deadlocked on this whole canopy proposal. They were 3-3, with those in favor citing the additional eyes on the street that would be provided, the weather protection. Those opposed, concerned about the fact that these balconies would most likely be opaque and shade the sidewalk. At the study session, we got some comments, I think, on both sides of the issue from council, so we did want to bring this back for further discussion. And then Planning Commission did recommend this public open space that council initiate a code amendment on that. Staff is actually, based on the feedback that we got last time, recommending that council consider this with the 2018 planning docket, not to put it on into the mix for this year. So with that, again, this summarizes the issues to be deliberated and acted on tonight. Open it up for any questions, any public comment if there is any. I wanted to recognize that Planning Commission Chair David Vliet is here with us tonight, so if there are any questions about the Planning Commission's deliberations here, I think he can answer those. and then move on to deliberations and a motion and vote.
Great. So is there anybody that signed up? Nope. Is there anybody that would like to give public comment? Go ahead, come up and give your name for the record.
Yes, I'm David Hoblitz, and I really have a question in that for the smaller lots, the larger lots are going to be 15,000 feet or above. If someone were to sell off a lot or a part of a lot, if they're allowed to split that, does that then change the rules for that particular lot? Or is it grandfathered in as, no, that came from a lot that was larger than 15,000 square feet? So that's just a question I have as I watch this. That's it.
Great. Is there any other public comment? Go ahead and come up and give your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Ari Gurowitz. I had a similar question to David's actually, which was more just out of curiosity that how they come up with a 15,000 square foot restriction there. What was the reason why you couldn't have the windows facing each other? And does having that that lot size restriction then get rid of that problem, or will that be some other problem? It just seems like a Band-Aid on top of something, a Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid, and I just didn't understand it, and it doesn't really matter to me. I was just curious. On the canopies, that was a really interesting thing too, and recognizing the New Orleans area. The question there is about, especially being that we're in the Pacific Northwest, is there anything about drainage from that top balcony so that people that are standing below don't get dumped on as they're walking? So just something else to think about maybe. That's it.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, but we have answers to these questions.
I can address the questions, yes. As far as the code does have provisions that don't allow subdivision or addition of lots in a way to circumvent the provisions of the code. So I think we are protected from somebody getting a larger lot and subdividing it in order to have the smaller setbacks and building separation. The reason for the window placement is just as you get development closer, denser development closer together, it's a good design issue. It's a recommendation that goes way back to the 90s Snohomish County handbook for residential design and it's just a matter of codifying that so that so you don't have neighbors' windows facing directly into each other's. And you'll see in a lot of communities that have, especially much older communities, that you can have very dense development and with careful placement of windows, you still have very good privacy. Let's see, there was one other question there.
Why 15,000 square foot was the demarc?
That goes back to that analysis, the map of the different lot sizes and the context here. It seemed to be a kind of a threshold that made sense in terms of the surrounding context.
I had one more. The canopies, the drainage from the canopies.
Yes. So the code does require buildings to handle their stormwater runoff. Storefront awnings, of course, they are allowed and sometimes do drip onto the sidewalk, but it's on a line so you can walk inside that drip line. We encourage flat or canopies that capture that drainage and don't create that situation, but it is allowed. Balconies in general do drain to internal drains.
Okay, great. Thanks for answering all those things on the fly. How about council deliberation? So there was a process recommended in here, and we did try it during the study session, is we take one item at a time, and we'll go through one by one and make a motion to approve whatever changes we make or just on its face, and then at the end we'll make a motion to approve all of them together.
If we had questions, do you want us to do it at each?
Yes. Yeah, let's just do one at a time.
Because I have a question on the 5th item that is proposed for docketing later. Because I think it impacts the discussion on building setbacks and reducing building setbacks.
You want to move it up before the building setback one?
I was just wondering if I could ask a question on that.
Um,
Or if we can have council questions about all 5 and then move into deliberation?
Yeah, we can do that. We're just trying to make it easy so we can keep track of ourselves. Okay, let's do council questions on all 5 if that's what everybody'd like to do. They seem okay. Go ahead.
So can you put up the slide again about the 5th item that's recommended for docketing later about open space?
There we go.
So can you explain this a little more? We're talking about here potential lots that are less than 15,000 square feet,
Yes.
and they're small, and when you put buildings on them, it's difficult to provide for the required open space on that lot. And so the idea is to, in this deferral, to do what? Allow them to just cash out and do a fee in lieu option, or does it allow them to have tinier open spaces? What was the idea in docketing this for further discussion?
I think the idea was that we weren't hearing strong support on the council for moving forward on this one this year. So we thought, given our workload and given that it made sense to recommend pushing it to the 2018 docket. So the downtown plan did create a fee in lieu option, and it was done partly with these smaller infill lots in mind. But we've had developers that have been interested in providing public open space even on smaller lots. And the requirements really seem to be geared more to larger lots. You can only split that public open space if there's more than 3,000 square feet required, which is only going to happen on a significantly bigger lot. And then the smallest qualifying open space would be 1,000 square feet. This is a site where they were proposing 2 small pocket parks or open spaces of about 750 to 800 square feet. And the idea was to create a corner space that was associated with the bus stop, and then on the alley, a space that would kind of relate to the front yards in the adjacent zoning. So we thought it was worthy of consideration. Planning Commission thought it was worthy of recommending the council consider this.
And so if we allow a reduction in building separation in whatever it is, item number 3, are we essentially exacerbating this problem? Because if we're allowing a setback between buildings, and I get the logic to maybe break them up so that the massing is at least more similar to surrounding area versus being one block, but you're just going to, in my opinion, when you reduce that building setback from, say, 20 feet to 10 feet, you're just going to get bigger units. They're going to plump up in size. And then you're going to have even less ability to provide for this public open space. And so do you see that exacerbating what we intend to deal with later?
Well, on those sites, the developer does have the option of not providing public open space and doing the fee in lieu. What we've experience is that they're motivated to provide the public open space if they can. And so on the example that shows the separate buildings, and some of them with a 10-foot separation, there is one with a 20-foot separation that's required for access to garages, but would create some space potentially for a public open space within that. And of course, they could have carved out a corner open space in this arrangement, similar to the one in the single building arrangement. So it's hard to predict exactly what developers will do with this, but the 20-foot minimum dimension for the public open space would remain. So you could do a 20 by 30 foot potentially open space that would qualify and utilize spaces that are created that also serve as drive aisles.
Okay, that was my main question about that item 5 and how it relates to building setback, and I'll just save my comments for later.
Can I?
Okay, Councilmember Freed.
I want to jump on that same issue. The developer that's requesting this, is this the property just here on 185th?
It came up with that one, and it also came up with another infill development on 185th.
Because all the drawings that I recognize here are from the property that sits on the corner where the council just sold the right-of-way last week, because the complaint was there was an unusable section of that property. And so it is a surprise to me that that same developer would come forward and complain about providing open space when they just purchased right-of-way from the city for $20,000. So it's just an interesting thing when the city last week did something to relinquish some right-of-way, and then they complain about the code itself. So I like the code that's been written. I think it provides open spaces throughout the city in the places where people live. I think the code specifically was written for that reason. If there's unique circumstances where a developer wants to purchase and improve other public spaces within our parks, they have that opportunity. But I think you water down the effectiveness of dividing open space that's going to be on a property as this is suggested here. So I'm glad we're not going to change it tonight, but I even question why we would want to even consider it in the future, because there is a reason the code was written to make effective public spaces. So thanks.
Does anybody else want to talk about item 5 while we're on it? Maybe we can just kill this one now. Kill it. Is there a motion to, I guess this one would be to defer to 2018 planning and...
Yeah, we weren't asking you to move this one forward at this time, so.
But it's in the packet, so we need to defer it, right? Or no?
Well, yeah, that's our recommendation, to defer it to the 2018 docket.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
I'd like to ask the chair of the Planning Commission to explain what their thoughts were on this topic, if it's all right.
Sorry for not being more dressed up. I was planning to sit in the audience tonight, but I'm glad to be here and be able to answer any questions. I guess as Dave Boyd mentioned, some of these recommendations were kind of split decisions. People had very differing views, but I believe that the majority, it's been a while too, that the majority of the Planning Commission believed that it was still, I guess, enabling developers to be able to create open spaces. I appreciated Councilmember Freed's comment, though, about usability and size of the open space. I guess that's all I can kind of explain at this point from what I recall. There was people in favor of it and people not in favor of making this potential change.
Okay, thanks.
Was that, do you have any more?
Well, I was just curious
Yeah.
what the conversation was about and what the pros and cons were in the conversation for and against.
I believe it was, so Dave, you're saying right now that developers have the ability just to pay a fee in lieu. Is that correct? I guess if I can recall, some of the conversation had to do with instead of just doing a fee in lieu, that maybe it provides potential open spaces as small as they might be, but at least some open spaces rather than just paying and not having any open space on that particular parcel. And I'm trying to remember back, because as you can see, we had a lot of talk about the two different pictures and what a developer might do with regards to buildings and having window spaces, and I can't remember if that had added in at all with the open spaces, but I think it had more to do maybe with the building setbacks and the the distance between buildings. Yeah, but if anybody else has any other questions, let me know if it's on this or any of the other topics. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other discussion on this one or a motion? Oh,
Is there a motion on the floor?
not yet. But now Councilmember Agnew.
Yeah, I'd like to defer amendments to the public open space requirements for small infill lots to 2018.
I'll second it. So it's moved and seconded, moved by Councilmember Agnew, seconded by myself to defer this topic to the 2018 code and docketing process. Any discussion on the motion? Councilmember Sandberg?
I'm going to be voting no. I thought it was interesting, the comment was made that developers are motivated to provide the public open space if they can. My sense, and also based on what we deliberated on last week, is that they're motivated to provide the public open space if it's convenient to their development, and if they can put it where it's convenient for their building locations, and then create improvements that can then offset their park impact mitigation fee. So I think that the way it's worded right now, requiring a minimum of 3,000 square feet before you can divide it, and having a minimum of 1,000 square feet is what is creating, at a minimum, quality open space. And by changing that and reducing those requirements and allowing more flexibility is not a good direction. So I'll be voting no.
Any further discussion on the motion? Councilmember Freed?
I wonder if voting no would not bring this back for discussion, because if it does bring it back for discussion or have discussion now, I would rather make an amendment that would say that council no longer considers this. I mean, we want developers within our community that honor the vision that the citizens have. We discussed this downtown plan for, I believe, over a year and a half. And we want developers that come within our jurisdiction, that want to be part of our community, that want to honor the code that our citizens put a considerable amount of time and thought into. So I would make an amending motion that we no longer consider.
Second.
So there's an amending motion to basically no longer consider the open space, public open space requirements for small infill lots. Any discussion on the amending motion? Seeing none, does everybody know what they're voting for? Yes or no? Do you need help? All right. Go ahead, place your vote. Fails 1, 2, 3, 4 to 2 with Councilmember Spivey absent and excused, and Councilmember Sandberg and Freed in the affirmative. I said that backwards. Sorry. Okay, so we're back to the underlying motion, which is to defer this topic to the 2018 docketing process. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, place your vote. Passes 1, 2, 3, 4 to 2 with council members Freed and Sandberg in the negative, and Councilmember Spivey absent and excused. Hey, only 4 more to go, guys. So if everybody's okay, let's start on number 1, which is revise and clarify regulations for home occupation and live work uses. Is there a motion or any discussion on this item? Or I'm sorry, deliberation or a motion? Yeah, go ahead if you have questions.
So I recall Councilmember McNeil bringing up the question about limits to the number of businesses. And I don't remember what your response was, but I do remember the specific scenario that he was concerned about. And so I'm wondering if there's a way to limit that or what your recommendation might be. I didn't see it addressed in the packet.
Well, in our home occupation code citywide, we don't limit the number of business. There are limits on the number of client visits, the number of non-resident employees. You can only have one. But if a couple sharing an apartment each has a home occupation, that would be allowed. Or if one person has multiple, that would be allowed as long as they met the other conditions.
What about types of businesses and storage and business vehicles? Are there limits on that?
Yeah, there are limits on types of businesses. So businesses that have large outdoor storage requirements are not allowed as home occupations. That sort of thing.
But no limits on the number of business vehicles?
Not, I'd have to go back and look at the code. Not that I'm aware of it. It has to do with the number of, or for example, we've had requests for taxi services to be as a home businesses with multiple vehicles parked, and the code does not allow that. So there are controls there. I just don't have the exact number. We would apply the same standards that we apply citywide in downtown.
I guess my concern is I could see a business where the vehicles are not your typical sized residential vehicles, and I guess I'm wondering if those are parking in your neighborhood and they're not your standard residential type vehicles, is that allowed? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there are restrictions on oversized trucks. I don't have the specific restrictions, but for example, if you had a food truck business, food trucks need to go back to a commissary provisioning kitchen each day anyway, so that they wouldn't be able to park that on the street in front of their residence or in their
neighborhood.
Yeah, or it would. There are other sites for that. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions on this item?
Yeah, I got a question on this, and probably Tom and James have a lot to say about it too. But I know I was called a couple years ago into Valhalla where there was somebody operating a business at the top of the hill, and there were a lot of work trucks that were parked there overnight consistently, and I got called by the neighbors, but our code didn't allow for any control of that. So did we change something from the last 2 years that now we can control that? Because it was a concern to the neighbors at the top of Valhalla that so many trucks were being parked. I think it was a contractor or landscape business, if I recall.
Yeah, and I do believe there are limits on that kind of outdoor storage of vehicles in our code. I just don't have the specifics.
Yeah, because you could see that, I mean, everybody has the right to operate a business. We live in America, they have that right, but when it starts encroaching on parking in people's houses in the right of way and so many different vehicles are there, it starts to impinge on the way people live within their own community, so.
Okay, Councilmember Freed.
Yeah.
Can we give the floor to the city attorney for a second?
Sure.
I think he has the piece of code.
Oh, great.
I actually don't. I'm looking in the code right now to see if I can find out where that is as well.
Oh, sorry. I got the signal that he's got it. Sorry.
Yeah, I'd like to defer to Councilmember Sandberg.
Councilmember Sandberg?
So I just want to add on examples, because this is a concern, because as the economy has changed, more people are working out of their homes. There aren't, as far as I know, there aren't prohibitions in the code. So for example, in my neighborhood, we had a large, like a Snap-on tools truck that didn't fit in the driveway and hung over the sidewalk, which never received a code citation. We have a home that operates both roofing and maid service business, another home that operates, I don't know how many businesses, but a lot of high traffic. And so if we have the time, then I think we should make the change now. If if we decide as a body to make the limited change, to make home occupations allowable in Sunrise Valley View and the other suggestions with live work, that we docket looking at home occupations in the future. Because it is a concern, and we've heard it a lot from other people as well.
So I don't have any issue with somebody having multiple business in the home, because it could be that a wife is an accountant and maybe the husband's a counselor or something to that extent, and there would be two businesses within there. I think what's the impact of the community is the number of visitors that you would have in a day. Maybe that's 1 an hour or whatever it might be. So it'd be nice to have that discussion. So I appreciate, as I understand, that there's not a control on the number of businesses, but ultimately how that impacts the community. So hopefully we can chat about that.
I've got the code limitations here. So home occupations shall generate no more than 2 vehicle trips per hour to the licensed residents, except for the 1 continuous 3-hour period per month. The home occupation may generate up to 10 vehicle trips. I think that was for uses like piano teacher that having a recital or something like that. Prohibited are automobile, truck, boat, and heavy equipment repair, auto, truck, body work, or boat hull or deck work, parking and storage of heavy equipment, storage of building materials for use on other properties, painting or detailing of autos, trucks, boats, or other items, outside storage of equipment materials, or more than 1 vehicle related to the business, vehicles larger than 10,000 pounds gross weight operated out of the premises, or parked on the property or on adjacent streets, so it goes and extends to the neighboring streets, and taxi cab, van, shuttle, limousine, or other transportation services are not allowed.
Great, thank you. Did you find that, City Attorney?
This is it's in the use tables for residential uses.
1206.
1206.140B8.
All right, is there any other questions or discussion? Councilmember McNeil?
Yes, thank you. So, David, I just to clarify, when you're citing that, are we talking about parking, or are we talking about the use of a home for a business? Because to me, it sounds like there's 2 different issues there. One is the issue that we're referring to in Valhalla was an issue of parking vehicles on the street and storing materials, not necessarily somebody who had a home occupation business. They may have owned their own business, but it was more of an issue of vehicles parking on the road. So I want to be careful with the decision that I make, that we're not interfering with people that want to have home occupation businesses and looking at people that have parking or material issues storing them on their property.
Right, and what we're proposing is to allow home occupations in any residential use in the downtown. Currently, again, I think through a Scrivener's error, they're not allowed in Sunrise Valley View, in the single-family neighborhood where they had been allowed previously.
And then we have code that takes care of the parking, as you just read, I think, for storage of materials. Is that included somewhere for that area as well?
Yeah, the downtown plan references the citywide limitations on home occupation. Home occupations.
Thank you.
Good. I don't have anything else. Oh, we're doing a second round on this one? Is everybody okay with the second, going to second round?
I would just beg to differ with that assessment, because the prohibition is on heavy vehicles, a large roofing truck, or a Snap-on tool trucks. That's not a code violation. Doesn't address the amount of parking that occurs on the street. It talks about a rate, not 2 vehicles per hour, not all the parking that occurs when somebody is operating businesses out of their home. So I agree. I don't want to limit home occupations and the ability for people to conduct their business out of their home, but the things that you're describing are not providing the protections for the complaints that we're hearing.
Go ahead, Councilmember McNeil.
Since we're doing round 2 real quick. So I'm a little concerned because throughout our community, when we went around and were campaigning a couple years ago, the one thing that I noticed throughout our community was a lot of the people are blue-collar workers that bring home their vans and their trucks from work. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're working from home, but they do have those vehicles. So is there a provision for a guy who works for an HVAC contractor who brings home his van every day and his tools are in his van and then he takes that van to work? Is there anything stopping them from doing that?
No, as long as they're parking it legally.
Okay, so when we talk about the Snap-on tool guys, we could potentially be talking about that is the truck that they go to work every day in, and they sell the tools out of that vehicle, and they bring it home and they park it at the end of the day. That's legal or illegal?
That's illegal, again, as long as they can park it legally.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
I was going to move the recommended action.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councilmember Agnew to move the recommended action. I'm just going to add to it, hope it's okay, on the home occupation and live-work uses. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, place your vote. Passes unanimously with Councilmember Spivey absent and excused. So we're on to building orientation. Is there any questions of staff, or we can entertain a motion? Deputy Mayor.
So I did notice that you have listed that there can't be a blank wall on a building face that's not the frontage, but actually fronts on the street. But I'm wondering if there is more language around articulation or something more than it just can't be blank.
Yes, there are requirements for both vertical and horizontal articulation. Buildings have to have a distinct base and top. There's requirements for horizontal indents or pop-outs and they vary by zone.
And are those, so is the articulation set forth in terms of scale and widths and that sort of thing?
Yes.
So that it fits into the neighborhood?
Yeah, yes. And also, there's requirements for shop fronts, for a further articulation of shop fronts to create the window door rhythm for those neighborhoods, for the commercial neighborhoods.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Councilmember Sandberg.
So does the language as it's currently written require that the building be oriented to a street and that an alley doesn't count?
That's right.
So can you put up the slide that has the hypothetical development for Lot P North?
Oh.
Just south of Popkini.
Sorry.
So that the top building, because you say in the agenda bill that there is an access drive between that building and the open space, but the proposal was to develop that more as an alley than a street. So are you talking about that? What about the east-west street or whatever that is with that is considered a street?
Yes, that is a public right-of-way.
And do we have any other street in our city with that kind of orientation, with all of that parking?
With the perpendicular parking?
Yeah.
We don't, and this was a very early proposal. That's not part of the current planning for that street. But that was something that I think at that point we said that we would consider that, and if it could be done safely, we would. But we never got to the point of actually approving that.
Well, I guess I want to go on record saying that I oppose a street in that configuration because with all that parking, it creates a lot of conflicts with people trying to get in and out and park and then travel east-west on that street. The original downtown plan called for 2 east-west streets, one at 186, which is what that is essentially, and then 183rd, which is just north of the library. And if you'll remember, we sort of abandoned the concept of a east-west connection on 183rd because it was too difficult or whatever. But we're going to have a lot of traffic issues with Pop Keeney Stadium ingress and egress. And we've already removed one east-west connection in that area where it was originally planned as a grid network. So I don't think it doesn't sound like it necessarily bears on the amendments at hand, because you're telling me that that is classified as a street and not an alley, but I oppose that kind of configuration. We don't have a street like that anywhere in the city, and that's going to be really important for free-flowing access, ingress and egress in that area. So in terms of building orientation, you said that you've been interpreting the code to mean that buildings will orient to the street except where it's essentially impossible for them to orient to the street.
Well, it's never impossible. Even on this site, you could have larger buildings that all fronted on and were oriented to the street. But we've interpreted the code as meaning that all of those street fronts have to have buildings oriented on them, and they have to meet the frontage coverage requirements. And once they do that, if there's room in the back for backlot buildings, and if they're well connected through a network of public open spaces as on this one, that should be allowed.
So when all of the street fronts are exhausted, they can use interior facing.
Right.
So how is that reflected exactly in the code language?
The code language states that every site must have buildings fronting on its street frontages, which I think was really the intent here, and that's how we've been interpreting it. So that on a larger site like this, once you've satisfied that requirement, then yes, you can have some buildings that are on either interior drive aisles or public open spaces, or potentially on an alley.
So do you know on what page of our agenda packet that is reflected?
That is on page 103, and I can pull that up as well. So there's the actual language. It really required very minimal changes to the existing language there.
So this one says, all parcels shall have buildings located along and oriented toward new existing street. It doesn't exactly say that once all of that frontage is exhausted, then you can have interior facing buildings. It says it has to have buildings. So you're not concerned that this language could be interpreted to I'm going to orient, whatever number of buildings best suits my development desires, and then do something different?
No, because we have a frontage coverage requirement as well that in most districts require, well, it varies from 70 to 90% of the frontage has to be covered by buildings facing the street. So that covers that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Freed? Sorry, I thought you had questions.
No, but I would read the language out loud on that page, except where noted in the district regulation pages, section so-and-so. All parcels in the plan area shall have buildings located along the oriented towards new or existing streets. That doesn't even, we could have two buildings that are 50 feet wide and 150 foot right of way, or width. It doesn't say that we shall fill them, basically. And I think that's the concern of a little tweaking that may need to occur in that language to make sure that it's clear that we should be orienting all buildings to complete the right-of-way up to all setbacks, except for where public open space could be provided. And once that maximum is reached, then it would be permissible to put buildings in those areas at the back. You see what my concern would be?
Yeah, but again, I think that is covered by having the frontage coverage requirement that I put up on the screen here. In the downtown transition district, it's 70% of the frontage needs to be covered by buildings.
Okay.
So each street frontage would have to have that 70% coverage. And then as you go to the more intense districts, the percentage goes up 80% in downtown neighborhood, and it's 100% in the downtown core.
You're exactly right. Thank you, sir.
All right, do we have a motion? Anybody? I can't make a motion.
To approve.
Motion to approve. There's no language here. Building frontage requirements as presented.
Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councilmember McNeil to approve the downtown plan regulations amendments for the building orientation. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, place your vote. Passes unanimously with Councilmember Spivey absent and excused. We're on to space between buildings and setbacks. Is there any questions on this item or a motion?
I have a comment.
Councilmember Sandberg.
So, like I said before, I'm concerned that when we decrease those building setbacks, I understand the logic, which is to encourage the developer to break up the building so that adjacent to existing residential, they're presented with multiple buildings as opposed to one big monolithic building. But I'm concerned that we're using the Lower Maywood Hill residential properties and their setbacks as a reason to for the separation that we're proposing for this area, because a single family, I just want you to imagine yourself being a single family home up against one of these new developments. And even though the scale is smaller when the buildings are broken up, it's still a lot bigger than the scale of your home. And so when I was thinking about decreasing the building setbacks, I thought, well, you know, what the developer's going to do is just provide bigger units, basically, to fill that space. So they'll break up the building, but the individual units will become larger because that is what the market will support. Those units will be worth more money, and I think that's what would be built. And so we're going to get even, and that's why I mentioned that I was concerned that it was going to exacerbate this problem with the open space that is now deferred to the future. So I was thinking, yes, we should reduce this the building setbacks interior to the development, but for that reduction in setback on the interior buildings, apply that to a rear or side yard setback to existing residential. Or they could apply it to open space, providing more open space on their site. So they get the option of making their buildings closer so that they'll break it up, but that space doesn't just get automatically subsumed into building envelope. And so my proposal was not to just decrease it to 10 feet, or I think the proposal is 5 feet on each side, so 10 feet. Not just to allow that decrease, but to allow that decrease, but apply that elsewhere on the property, like on the perimeter adjacent to existing residential, or where it can provide better open space on that parcel.
Any further discussion on the motion? Councilmember Freed?
That's a very creative thought that you would have, and I'm wondering if we would allow this setback as an option, but anybody who took that option could not pay in lieu of the public open space. So they could get the reduction, but they'd have to provide the public open space on their property and not pay in lieu to have it provided elsewhere. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic because, an interesting idea, because we don't want to get into a situation where they can, again, inflate the price of their provided open space to get around doing their park impact fee. So, yeah, I think that's something to explore.
I think, Dave, as you led us through this discussion several years ago, one of the most motivating factors for me as I considered the step-down approach was, I forget the exit, but as you're going, the first exit as you head up I-5 from 405, you take a left and there's the whole park and ride there. There's a very large multifamily development that's there. You go to the community behind and you look up and cannot believe how a 65-foot building's towering over a 15-foot high building. It's like unfathomable. And so we took that in consideration at this time 4 or 5 years ago whenever we wrote this code. So I think it's really important, as Councilmember Sandberg's saying, is to keep that transition zone in place and intact with the setbacks that we hoped for at that time and the community hoped for as well. So without some provision that open space would be maintained on this site, this is probably not something that I could support tonight. So thanks, Dave.
Deputy Mayor?
Can you remind me, these lots, what's the building height limit on these 15,000 square foot lots that would have a 5-foot setback?
This would apply to downtown transition and general downtown corridor that are primarily 3 stories. There's portions of the general downtown corridor that are 4 stories, but not really the portions that are up against the residential zones.
So the height is anywhere between like 35 feet or 45 feet?
Mostly 35 feet.
And then the minimum between buildings would be 10 feet?
With living space windows, yeah.
I'm really torn because I understand the idea of allowing massing that would mimic the existing neighborhood, but I think it comes at a cost of creating canyons. And really, as far as efficiency goes, I think you can accomplish I guess mimicking the scale of the existing neighborhood through articulation and, pop-outs and that sort of thing that kind of cut down on that massing. And so I'm really not in favor of the 5-foot setback. I guess I'm just not for it. I don't think I can vote for that.
Councilmember Agnew?
And as we talked earlier, I'm not in favor of that 5-foot setback either. I just can't support that.
Councilmember McNeil, you're good? Okay. Is there a motion?
Is there any support to having staff look at the idea of applying any reduction to either open space or increased setback to existing residential, and maybe give an example of that so we could see what that looked like?
You got one in your back pocket?
Well, I guess my only thought is that we would probably include that in the discussion about the public open space requirement and wrap that in to next year's discussion on that, if you initiate that. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Is there a motion?
I move that we do not take up the recommended action.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councilmember Agnew to not move forward. I guess it would be all of 3 is what I'm getting out of your guys' motion in a second. Item number 3 is not just the 5-foot setback, it's the all setback changes proposed for between buildings and side setbacks. Okay, is that what you meant? Just make sure. All right. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, please place your vote. Passes 5-1 with me in the negative and Councilmember Spivey absent and excused. We're on to item number 4, which is the canopies in the right-of-way. Is there any questions or discussion? Councilmember Freed?
So do we have railing standards, do we not, Dave? Mr. Boyd?
Our architectural regulations have requirements and more guidelines regarding railings and that kind of detailed design.
That would be, for me, the biggest concern about allowing ultimately livable space coming out over right-of-way and creating some inconsistencies in look with different types of railings that may not be appealing. But I guess if we have a design code, maybe that's satisfied. For me, it just feels awkward to have somebody 10 feet overhead extending 6 feet over a public right-of-way that's living. It feels like it's encroaching on public space. And if a developer wants to have porches abutting of right-of-way, they have the option to take their building back that 5 feet or 6 feet and still have the look if that's an important look to them. So I'm not in favor. I like to protect our public right-of-way. I think I've been clear on that. And so in this case, I wouldn't be voting in the affirmative because it would, if there's a motion that's made, because I just think how the code is written currently, I think is fine. An awning, I think, is far different than somebody standing over your head with their patio furniture. That would be inconsistent sitting on top of our right-of-way. So.
Deputy Mayor?
Those examples of the balconies in New Orleans, any guess or as to how deep those are or how much those come into the right-of-way?
Well, I would guess that the upper one is at least 6 feet.
Can you actually flip to that slide? Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And then on the lower left, you probably have about a 2 foot, well, no, it's more than 2 feet because it has chairs on it. The yellow building has shallower balconies, and the blue has a little bit deeper balcony, it appears, on the upper level.
So if I'm remembering from watching the Planning Commission meeting, there was a lot of concern about people, how do I put this, polluting the visual space with bikes or whatnot. Is there a way to try to avoid that or have some way? Because these look lovely because there's not a bunch of junk in the balcony. And then again, they're also open, so you can see right through. Versus if they were opaque, and I guess I'm not really getting a good sense of what our restrictions would be.
Well, we don't have any currently, and it hasn't. At least nobody's complained about that. At least that I'm aware of as an issue on the open balconies that we do have on some of the downtown buildings. But I think that's really more of a building management issue. I'm not sure that we want our code compliance officer going door to door in apartments and
right. I'm just saying that was a concern, and so that's something that I do remember was a bit contentious in the discussions with the Planning Commission.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing for me, I don't think I could support a 6 foot, but I might be able to support a 4 foot wide. 6 foot seems like it really does come into the right of way a lot. I like the idea of activating the streetscape. Probably not with New Orleans type activation, beads and such, but I could see it would enliven the downtown. So, well, I guess we'll see what happens. Thanks.
Councilmember Sandberg?
I think what's interesting in that lower picture with the yellow building is that the blue building right next to it has an awning that if it were 6 feet deep, then that would be allowable in our code currently. Is that correct?
The awning, not the balcony?
Yeah, the awning.
And I think that's quite a bit more than 6 feet.
But if it were 6 feet,
If it would be, yeah.
then it would be allowed.
Yeah.
And, you know, just looking at that one example, the balcony is far more visually appealing than the canopy that is that if it were 6 feet would be allowed. I think I could support balconies. I think that what the deputy mayor was saying was balconies that only extended 4 feet into the public right of way. Because I understand all the arguments about providing shelter from the elements that happen here year round. So, but I also understand protecting the right of way as well and protecting intrusions into that.
That's right. What? Go ahead. Yep.
Because when we were discussing this, there was, I guess, varying views on, well, there was the shading, but then there was, as I believe one of the citizens mentioned, rain that would come out and be falling down on a certain area of the sidewalk. The only thing I guess to think about, if it's 4 feet, is it gets a little bit closer to where people might be walking up against the building, whereas if it were further out, that during the rainy season, the water would be 2 feet further towards the street. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on this motion or a motion? Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you. Can you show the illustration of the balcony there? Yeah. So is that indicating what would be 6 feet out?
Yeah, roughly. Yeah, this isn't a scale drawing, but that's what I tried to show. 2 feet for the upper balcony, 6 feet. This is actually an illustration of a 6-foot canopy that we converted to a balcony.
And it's also referencing a 15 foot above the sidewalk. Is that?
Again, it's approximately. It's probably a little lower if that's 6 feet. It's should have been scooched up a little bit.
Okay, and so then we've got the street lights, we've got the trees growing in there.
So they would have to be spaced to accommodate the other street elements.
Okay, and then we talked about a limit of 50 feet wide?
That was the recommendation based on the maximum storefront width. But as I wrote in the staff report, that could be reduced as well.
Okay, and can you, so this is, I mean, the sidewalk there is, I'm trying to in my mind visualize that's a 6 foot balcony on, to me, what appears to be a 12-foot sidewalk?
Yeah, approximately.
Okay, so can you go back to the New Orleans picture? So let's just say that's a 8-foot awning, right? To me, it does look very dark in there. I can't tell, but I would assume that that's probably an 8-9 foot door on that, the yellow building, the creamish color building.
Yeah.
Maybe 10 foot max, but
yeah.
that's high. I mean, I'm looking at the people, the pedestrians walking right there. I'm going to assume they're 5 to 6 feet tall. That's double that, so it could be 10 to 11 feet. So to me, it appears that if we took that awning as a kind of an example, you can see how much shading would be in there. Is that, am I looking at that correctly underneath the awning?
Right, and I think it's at least 8 feet, if not 10 feet. I would guess. Yeah.
And then we would add the trees once they start to grow up as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one thing we wouldn't allow is here we have awnings and balconies supported on posts within the street right away. That wouldn't be allowed. They would have to be cantilevered or suspended.
So I think I'm kind of tending to agree with Councilmember Freed on this one. I think that I actually saw there's a building on Beardsley that kind of had their balconies tucked in a little bit. And I kind of agree that if the builders want to provide that balcony space, tucking them back in a little bit might be a good way to accommodate that outdoor living space and keep the street frontage cleaner. I tend to agree with Deputy Mayor Dewar on the clutter. I could see, bikes. I mean, here we see pictures of chairs out there, and maybe at the top one, the purplish colored building, a table, things like that. That kind of seems like a cool setting, but I don't know. To me, it just doesn't feel like a 4 or 6 foot wide balcony is going to be large enough to accommodate much more than bicycles or, maybe surfboards or things like that, paddle boards. But I really, at this point, I don't think I can support it without having a little bit more information on what would be required for that use. So, but thank you.
Everybody had a chance to talk, I think, except you good? You want to talk? Councilmember Agnew?
I could support the 6 foot. There's probably not a whole lot wrong with bringing a little New Orleans to Bothell. I think the balconies would help a little bit with our inclement weather that we have in the wintertime. I think they'd add a little touch to the downtown. I think they'd look nice. So I could support this.
So I did have one question. I had already primed the city attorney, so you were probably off the hook over there, Mr. Boyd. But it said the city attorney has advised that there are no legal issues with allowing canopies and balconies to extend into right-of-way. So you and I discussed a little bit. Did you have a chance to kind of formulate or do you still kind of stand at that position, or do you have any concerns like I do about right-of-way uses and whether or not we have the authority to allow people to use a right-of-way unconditionally, or is there a mechanism that you would recommend that we would use to allow balconies in the right-of-way?
I mean, one option that we could do is to not permit this use without a right-of-way use permit. We go down that avenue. So if a developer wanted to design a balcony that then jutted out into the right-of-way, he or she or the entity would then have to apply for a right-of-way permit. That was just brought up to me shortly before council. I haven't had time to really vet that thoroughly, but that is one path that we could choose.
Yeah, because I just had some concern about, so right-of-ways get dedicated to the city, and they're usually the dedication is specific back to the early 1900s. It's for road use or something like that. And I don't think, just from my other job, that we can just outright say, hey, go ahead and build a balcony in there without it being on a temporary basis, as in a temporary right-of-way use permit basis. Because let's say we have hovercraft someday that will go down the side of the building or something. We want that balcony out of the way. We should have the right and the authority. Actually, I think have to have our right and authority preserved to say, get your balcony, or even your building for that matter. There's cases where a building's built into the right-of-way. And the city can allow that, but under the condition that it's understood that that is still right away, as it was dedicated to the city back in whenever it was, and that it will remain in the city's possession in perpetuity for right away uses. So I have some concerns about balconies in the right of way just for that reason. Right of way is a precious commodity to a city. And we've got to protect it in perpetuity. So if developers are willing to take that chance that, someday the city might come back and say, remove your balcony, then I would be okay with, maybe be okay with it. I still just have a lot of concerns about, them going in the first place. So I think everybody had a chance to talk. So is there a motion? And then we get to go to break. Councilmember Freed.
Make a motion not to consider this further.
It's been moved by Councilmember Freed, seconded by Councilmember McNeil to not move this forward, the canopies and balconies code amendments forward. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So we've had the opportunity to see some investors come in downtown Bothell, and we're welcoming them here, very happy that they're here. But there's certainly been some cases I'm sure all of us have been able to recognize as we've looked up on some of these balconies for a period of time. There were some blue tarps sitting over people's materials on their porch, even at Six Oaks. People put their barbecues outside, they put their bikes outside. There would be a strange interaction that would happen with people living privately within a public right-of-way. And so my hope is that council as a whole would accept and vote in the affirmative for this motion, I think we need to keep our right-of-ways pure. And like the mayor said, we need to make sure that we are able to, in the future, whatever may come, hovercrafts or whatever it might be, to be able to use our right-of-way as we seem fit, whether it's now or 50 years from now. So I appreciate the creativity that comes here. As regards to awnings, we do have design requirements for the awnings that are currently in our downtown core, and they do provide adequate shade or protection from rain. They do collect the rain and can distribute it properly, and they can extend out, but they are consistent in design. What becomes very inconsistent, again, is how people would live on their balcony if it's only 10 feet above the ground within a right-of-way. I imagine what Main Street would look like. So hopefully there's support for this. Thanks.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, place your vote. So vote in the affirmative is to not move it forward, correct? Yes, okay. Passes 3-2 with Councilmember Spivey. Does it pass that way? I need 4 votes, right? Oh, there's 4, never mind. Passes 4-2 with Councilmember Spivey absent excused. And then do we need a final motion to wrap it up, or are we good? Not at this time? Okay.
So then I can make the changes based on this, and then bring the revised findings, code amendments for Mayor Reum's review and signature.
Is everybody comfortable with that? Does it need to come back to council? Okay. Yeah, just bring it we'll give it to the city manager and I'll review it and sign it.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Boyd. All right, so we're going to take a break and we'll be back at 8:15.